And now here's part 2 of our episode. Okay, so why is that the standout track from the album?
Okay, so first of all, this song is beautiful. Like, it's just so, and so it's essentially like story. I'm a lyric girl. I love the music, obviously. If the lyrics are amazing, the music is terrible, I'm not going to be into it. But I really am here for the lyrics and like what they're saying, which I'm sure once again ties into the being able to sing it thing.
Totally.
But it's the sort of POV of the song is clearly a woman who has been left by her partner or husband, and just like the processing of those feelings. And I think there is, I just think it's so nuanced, and I think there's so much music out there after someone has been like left or cheated on, which is the implication in this song, is that there's been some infidelity, that it's like, screw that guy, what a dick, like blah, blah, blah. And this is just this like beautiful thing of like, actually, like, I just miss you, and I just wish you were here, and I just wish you hadn't done this, and I wish you would come back. And I think that's very human, and I think it's easy when you're not. And like, also, I think what's so interesting to me about it is like, I have not lived through that experience. Like, I was cheated on by like my college boyfriend who I was with for 3 months, which sucked. Like, that was a bummer.
Still sucked.
Like, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like my husband and the father of my children had left me. But even so, like, not having lived that experience, listening to this track, I'm like feeling what is happening. I think that's really powerful, to like get so specific in your storytelling that even though that specific thing isn't a relatable experience, that the feeling is so specific and pure that you can feel like versions of that as you listen to it, even if you haven't lived through it. So yeah, I just think it's brilliant and thoughtful, and it shows heartbreak in a way, heartbreak in a situation where like the other person really has actively wronged you, and that does not inherently mean that you don't love the person anymore or you don't want to be with them.
Here. Yeah.
That's so real.
It's more complex than that. Exactly.
And there's just this part in the song where it's, oh God, it's so good. It's like when it's just song, and it's the bridge. And I don't know what played earlier, but if you can find a way to play this part of the song at some point as we go, it's the bridge. And she's been singing about like how sad she is. And then she's like, the lyrics are, I can give you 2 good reasons to show you love's not blind. And then she goes, she's 2 and she's 4 and you know, they adore you, so how can I tell them you've changed your mind? And then there's a key change. And she goes, sometimes I wake up. And it's like, you're like, because at that point you were like, there were kids this whole time?
Of course there were kids, Julianne. Of course there were.
And it's just like, even just now singing it poorly like I just did, I got chills just like thinking about that part of the song.
I felt it. It's
brilliant. And this is what's crazy. I was just looking up because I was like, which one of them got left by their husband? Like, whose autobiographical thing is this again? And I was looking up before this. Oh my God, it wasn't either of them. The 2 sisters wrote it about their parents. So they're the 2 kids.
God damn.
And I already
I didn't get that deep in the research. I did not go that level deep. And I am so glad you did. Because that is, I'm there too. She's 2 and she's 4. And you know they adore you. That's dirty. That is. That's down dirty. And then you're like, I'm right here, motherfucker. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
And apparently they were saying that like they have not talked about it with their parents, this track. Like, the dad is kind of in denial of the fact that that's even about him. The mom, like, they just like don't even acknowledge it.
Whoa.
Yeah. So wait, like, but so it was confirmed infidelity that the kids know about, and just no one talks about it, but they're still together?
No, the parents didn't stay together. The father left.
Oh, okay. For a second, I was like, oh my God, wait, they're still together and they're living in denial? No. Like, that's pretty epic.
And they never, like, talked about it with their kids.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
feel like that's a sort of a hallmark of something that like country music does well. And like you mentioned being like a lyrics person first.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe getting back to like you were asking us why this is the first time we're talking about a country album. I mean, I think like I know I'm more music first. And I think that a lot of country music, it is about the lyrics, and it is often about like a narrative story being told within the songs. Because I mean, you know, like I don't think there's a single, there might be one or two Radiohead songs that like actually tell a story. It's more kind of like a mood or a vibe that's going on, and it's largely about the like cuckoo instrumentation that's happening and how that creates something. But I think like, for me, the music is what does it, but like the sort of the effect that you just described from listening to that lyric and singing it and knowing what's behind it is like the same sort of effect I get when there's some sort of like really haunting musical passage within you know, one of my like cuckoo beep boop bands. So
beep boop
I don't know if this, I mean, this, you know.
Well, because you come from, correct me, like your way into music was playing piano, right?
Well, I mean, that's originally, yeah. I mean, so like I have things to say about classical music, and I can, and we also still have never covered a classical album on this podcast.
Not properly, kind of did, but
yeah, kind of, but like not head on. But
Switched
I
on
mean,
Bach, though. You dig that album probably.
Cool that actually is pretty cool.
Yeah.
but like, I mean, the sort of music I listen to now is probably way more because of 90s grunge, which is largely because my dad listens to classic rock in the car all the time. So I was hearing Pink Floyd and Zeppelin and the Beatles and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that like I like stuff that's a little more artsy or maybe a little more complex probably comes from the fact that like, you know, I know a little music theory, and I know what goes into playing a piano song, and a lot of the artists I do like are piano-based artists. So, yeah,
there might need to be a Chicks musical, though.
Oh well, I don't know. I just think, look,
you don't know?
Mamma Mia is a revelation.
Mamma Mia is great. Yeah, I'm pro Mamma Mia personally.
I'm heavy pro Mamma Mia. Also, ABBA was like my top listened to artist for the past like several years. I love ABBA.
I like ABBA. I'd hate to do too much research and find out their politics are terrible or something like that. But yeah, ABBA, I'm into it.
This is a complete offshoot, and then I'll get back to the point I was making, but guys, I was in the top 0.05% of listeners of the song Dancing Queen.
Really? That's surprising to me. That's actually surprising. That's
not surprising to me.
Okay, maybe it's not surprising to me. I don't know you well enough for that to be surprising to me, but it's crazy that you are in the top, because think about how often that song just gets played for no reason.
I know! I was like, this is like, I have to tell everybody about this. Yeah, that's really something.
That's something. Good for you. Okay, cool.
But anyway, I have a lot of opinions about like modern musical theater, and so until more I don't want anyone to touch jukebox musicals until we like start making some good original content, because it just feels
we got too many.
We
got too many. That's true. Yeah. That's true. I feel that. All right, so why don't we talk about like who they are? We've been talking about who they are, kind of like on their songwriting level. But like real quick, how about them in 2003? And like, is that a part of their story that you like feel really connected to, or like how does that live with you?
Yeah. So I just for context I don't forget exactly what it was they said, but basically it was like about Bush, and they like came out and said something about how like it was about being from Texas, and they said something about like being ashamed from being from the same.
They said they were at a concert in London, I believe, and they said that, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially like, hey, just so you know, we're with you guys. We don't want to go into Iraq. We think this is going to cause a whole lot of senseless violence, and it makes us ashamed that the president is also from Texas.
Yes,
is what I believe it was.
Which
complex statement, kind of.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's not straightforward.
No, but I think for who their listeners are and who their audience is, it's like was enough to make it clear, like, which spoiler was poorly received by their
in case you were waiting with bated breath to figure out how that went. Not great.
Yeah, and I think, it was something that I was like loosely aware of at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I grew up in Georgia, and there was a lot of conservative minded people around me. My parents are not that way. They're very liberal minded. And so it was something that, like, I bet I heard about it from my dad, and my dad talking about how awesome it was that they had done this and how.
Okay, cool. Because
then they came out with an album shortly after that called Not Ready to Make Nice.
Right.
And the song
great title.
It's, oh my God. And the title song, Not Ready to Make Nice, which obviously isn't on the album we're talking about, but it's so important to talk about.
It's relevant, yeah.
Just a phenomenal song. That's basically like, you guys want me to come out and take back what I said? We're not going to. Like, and we're hurt by how you responded. They were getting all these death threats, whatever. So, and here's what's really interesting is that I was talking to a friend of mine who grew up in Georgia, a little bit further out of the city from me, who's still a very close friend of mine. And this was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And the chicks came up and she was like, didn't they do something like super problematic early on? And I was like, okay, this is interesting. No. Like, yes, it was read as problematic from their audiences, but like, this is actually what happened. And she was, oh my God, because of where she grew up, the rhetoric around her about it was that the Dixie Chicks had done something really problematic and everyone should stop listening to them. And she like didn't care and didn't listen to the Dixie Chicks. So when she was young, totally went over her head what that would have meant. And then it just stuck in her brain as like they had done something bad. And then when I told her, like, oh my God. And I was like, I know. But I just think it really speaks to how negative their perception became in
God, yeah. You know, like there's still to this day, I feel like there's a bit of a cloud. There's a bit of a cloud around them in certain circles. And, you know, I just also think that we're 22 years on from the invasion of Iraq. And I mean, almost 22. I think it was happened in October, right? Was that, I may be wrong.
I can't remember.
In any case, you know, 22 years on, we're just starting to like have enough distance from that to like actually be able to look at it critically. And say, hey, what information did we have at the time? What powers were at play? And like members of the media still like it's like the internet is fundamentally changed the way that we communicate these ideas. But like they were participating in like a real, I mean, it's the tradition, right? It's the tradition of these particularly artists who are like singer-songwriters standing on a stage and saying some shit like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt really real. It didn't feel calculated, I guess.
No,
I was young, obviously, too. But like looking at it, it feels so genuine.
Yes, that's a really good way of putting it, because I think it's hard now. So much of that stuff, like, you know, all press is good press, like sometimes things like that can be very calculated, and but it didn't feel like. And part of what I like about them so much as a group is they just feel very real, and like they're making the work that they want to make and telling the stories they want to tell, and they'll be damned if people don't like it.
I'll hold space that maybe it is a psyop, but only because I hold space that maybe everything's a psyop.
Well, right, exactly.
Yeah. Yes. So like it could be, I could be so wrong.
Yeah.
They could be totally like conniving and just looking to get on the top of the pile.
Right.
But I don't think so.
I just don't think so.
They seem
well, especially because in 2003, 3 women, like, there's no way that they thought saying something bad would take them to the top. Like, because they're women in 2003. Like, no, everyone's ready to kick them to the curb no matter what happens. Like, I think that's part of the context too. Is like, people didn't like women. I mean, they still don't, but like, they especially didn't like him in the early 2000s. Like, so I think that's part of why
we just talked about Fiona Apple recently on the pod, and it's really this. It's a cool thing as a female artist to be able to find a space for yourself where you feel like you don't have to cater too much to what people want.
Yeah.
It is an amazing thing. Yeah. And we see the women that have been able to take advantage of those positions to make some really cool shit.
Yeah.
And I would count the chicks. I would count because they're legends now in my mind, you know, like obviously that's just kind of where my politics are as well. But like to me, they're legendary. And I respect the way, looking into it more, I respect the way that it feels like they responded to it as well. Like, it seems like obviously it was provocative in the way that they responded to it, but it was also very considered and very, very much like, no, we're sticking by what we believe.
And I also wonder, just in terms of like culturally and how people received country music, not wonder, I also think like that helped get them on the map across the board too.
Mhm.
Because I think so often people might be dismissive of country artists because they're like, oh, a bunch of hicks that think X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And these were 2 people that came out, or 3 people that were like, no, we actually think this and we're going to stand by it. I think that
Yeah.
that probably helped them be received less as just country artists. I mean, they were already on the map at that point, obviously, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Capitalized. Makes
Yeah.
sense. And capitalized in a good way.
yeah, exactly.
Capitalized even, just terrible term, you know. But you know, you could say they took advantage of the opportunity. They struck while the iron was hot.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Julianne, we gave you an impossible task. We asked you to supply us with a list of albums that you believe are perfect. We did not define the word perfect for you.
Mm-hmm.
You came back to us with this album as well as 2 musical theater albums.
Uh-huh.
And so we're curious to know, what standards did you use when you were deciding which albums to put on your list, and how does this album meet those?
As we've previously established, do I sound good when I sing it?
Yes.
That
Criteria
one.
for you. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Also, like diversity of sound. Like, to me, I'm talking about an album. This is something that I want to feel like I'm not listening to the same thing over and over again. I want to feel like and I think that this album does such a good job of every track feels like it's in slightly a different world and different tone and different meter and different energy. And also what we were talking about earlier with the storytelling. I just think there's really an album, I think, should have some storytelling going on and a story that is to be followed, not necessarily like in the typical story structure, but I think that's probably why I'm so drawn to musical theater, honestly, is because there's like literally story going on. But this felt like an album that also had a story going on, and I think a really strong story. And as I talked about with You or Mine, like that is exploring this one this one is feeling you experience when you're going through heartbreak. And I think the album does a really great way of exploring the different phases and shades of heartbreak. And there are tracks that get into being like, whatever, we're just gonna party, and tracks that get into like, screw you, you suck. Like, and I feel like it's covering the whole scope of hurt
Human
and
emotion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are sort of the big ones. And I think as a result, the reason it's an album I come back to is and sort of criteria for albums is like, every time I listen to it, I want to feel like I'm going through something new. And not just like, I'm just listening to this album that I like again. And this is an album that every time I've listened to it, different phases of my life, different things have meant different tracks have meant different things. I've had a different experience of it. And I think that this album is so specific, like uses such specificity to make it feel universal, so that the feelings, no matter what I'm going through, I'll look at them a different way through this music. Yeah.
Hell yeah. You get a big hell yeah from me on that one.
Yeah.
There's you really can't talk about an album without sort of like thinking about it as, you know, like markers in time. This is something we talk about a lot here, is what are the markers in time that this album does for you? And I think you kind of beautifully phrased that.
Thank you. Yeah.
So now I'm curious to know if in those other 2 albums that you put on there, which I'll just reveal were the soundtracks to Wicked and The Sound of Music, is that because you can sing those very well as well?
Of course. Also, like, look, this isn't. I want to be clear to all the listeners. I'm not like a professional singer. I just like, we're talking about like good amateur singing in the shower vibes, not like, you know,
yeah.
Intentional.
Exactly.
Intentional, like kind of like you mean it
Right.
when you're saying yes. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I still know almost all the words to Wicked. God, we just wore that CD out on road trips.
Oh yeah. And I still listen to it all the time. I saw the movie 3 times. Like,
doesn't feel like 3 hours. I'll tell you that. It's
No.
not perfect, but it doesn't feel like 3 hours.
I agree. And I also will say, though, I want to note that 3 times was too many times. 2 times.
Fair enough. 9 hours of your life is a lot
And
of time.
at the 3rd one, I was like, so I have seen this movie twice in the past.
I'm good.
Why
Yeah.
did I see this?
That's funny. That's really funny. Michael, what album did you have any musicals that were in rotation in your household growing up? I don't know if we've talked about that.
Not growing up. I do have a soft spot for The Sound of Music as a movie musical.
So good.
Oh, that's yes.
Yeah, it's just such a good movie. I mean, the musicals that drew me in first were like Phantom and Les Mis, and I loved The Who's Tommy. I saw it the first time.
So good.
I mean, and I feel like that's sort of like a perfect marriage of like theater and rock music for me is those two things put together. I didn't get to see the revival. I know it was very short lived on Broadway, but we do know the person who was the associate director on the original production of Tommy.
Maybe we'll have her on someday.
My former professor in grad school.
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one to have good feather to have in your cap.
Yeah.
The last jukebox musical I saw was Beautiful, the Carole King one, and it's good. I will say it's quite good. So I'm okay if we don't do any more after that one. Like I'm good after that one.
Right.
Or at least take a break. We should have a 10-year moratorium on jukebox musicals.
On jukebox musicals and on musical like movies made into stage musicals.
Like that Back to the Future bullshit.
Yes.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm okay with a 10-year moratorium. Then we'll come back to it. Think how good it's going to be when we come back to it.
Exactly, but like let's use our brains here. Let's get creative,
and they're out there. They're out there. Like we have a friend, Eric Richardson, who's a musical playwright. He's written some beautiful work. I co-produced one of his musicals a few years ago. So they're out there.
Well, and that's the thing is that they are out there. They are good. They're just not getting attention and money. Because people want to put their money behind Back to the Future the musical. So I'm like, if we ban them, then people will have to put their money behind the new ideas.
Sure. And plays with music.
Yeah.
Like I love play with music, but it's different.
Very cool.
It's not the same thing.
I think you've got your platform for running for public office, Julianne. A 10-year moratorium on jukebox musicals and musicals based on movies.
And when you're the president of Broadway, then I'm going to be the commissioner of baseball. And I have some very specific ideas. Okay? No more TV, just radio, only radio.
Whoa!
And no more night games.
Only during the day. Night games are so fun.
But we're going to do it. We're going to get back to the roots. We're going to get back to the roots of baseball when I'm commissioner.
Used to not be night games?
No more night games. Or no, how about this? All night games. outlaw baseball during the day. You're not allowed to play it during the day, only at night.
I'm not following the through line of the desires at all.
Don't worry. I want to. We got to give the people what they want. I got this, though.
He just wants power, Julianne. He just wants power.
No one man can have all this power.
Oh, do not quote him. Oh boy. Oh man.
Well,
all right.
It seems like perhaps we've reached that point where the giddiness of the conversation has converged with the font of our pop culture references. That maybe we just need to move to the next phase of this, Michael. Dun, dun.
Sorry, I got all happy, trigger happy on that.
What was that?
I'm sorry.
That was our sound effect.
It's our sound effect for the next phase.
There hasn't been sound effects this whole time, and now suddenly there's a sound effect.
There's a sound effect.
It's we realize the inconsistency. Yeah, we have one sound effect.
Yeah. We're really low budget over here. We're really mom and pop. Pop podcasting.
We've got lots of ideas for sound effects. Like there needs to be a ding every time Radiohead is mentioned, a ding every time Cherubs is mentioned, because we've had multiple Cherubs guests, and also there's a moment coming up in a second when we really should need a sound effect and we don't have one. And believe me, you will feel the absence. So just remember that feeling that I've said this.
Getting that one more sound effect is going to change the game. It's
everything. We're gonna beat Joe Rogan once we get that second sound effect.
Hey, that Joe Rogan, we're coming for you, bald ass.
Similar vibes between your podcast and his, it feels.
Totally.
Very similar. Yeah.
That's what we've been told.
Yeah.
You guys are really Rogan-esque. That's what we've been called that. Anywho, okay, we're in the deliberation phase now. Done. And I think I'll start. I think you started last time. Listen, country music, I have a soft spot for in my heart because I grew up around a lot of it, and my family loves country music. My grandpa, he'd have the contemporary country music station playing on his little radio in the garage when we were making birdhouses together when I was a kid. And it was terrible country music sometimes. Just the worst, most saccharine schlock you've ever heard in your entire life. But I'll tell you what, it's romantic and it's transportative. And I think it's very important. It's an American tradition that I think bears experimentation, and it bears such beautiful stories. And I was glad that this album and these women were the ones that you brought to us, because it gave us an entry point into country music that I think acknowledges its complexity and its potential. Also, I think they do a lot with country music, and they do a lot with pop music, period. So I think you built a wonderful case. And just hearing the fervor with which you responded to the lore that you discovered, the deeper you dug in, I mean, it all painted a pretty beautiful picture. Michael, what do you think?
I mean, full disclosure, not a fan of country music. I'm not. And I think that having this conversation, like, I sort of had a realization midway through the conversation when you were talking about how you responded to that particular standout track, is when I realized that, like, oh, the way that makes you feel is the way that my music makes me feel. And here on this podcast, we do not like to yuck anyone's yum. It sort of feels like we are always, whenever anyone comes on, we are trying to, like, understand what that album means to them and how that achieves perfection, even if it's something that we've never listened to or we've had an aversion to. There have been, I will say this, I didn't have an aversion to listening to this. There is one album we've covered that I did have an aversion to listen to, and we try to remain open, but I really feel like something clicked, and I'm glad that it was you. You were the person who was able to make that click for us here. And so I think you also made a pretty stellar case. Also, I just knew you would be fun to talk to on the podcast episode. So there's the added bonus. So I'm going to put it to you, Tyler.
Okay, do it.
You've heard Julianne's case. You've spent some time listening to this album. You've formed your own opinions. You've connected them your own history, and now you've listened to what she's had to say. And I'm wondering, what do you think? How has Julianne done? Does this album go to 11? Is it a perfect album?
You're goddamn right it is. Well, Howard,
now,
for you.
wouldn't this be a great place for a fanfare sound effect? See? Don't you miss it?
It's coming.
I didn't miss it because I went, yeah!
Most people end up doing that for us. Yeah, it's helpful.
Because you knew that our cheap asses wouldn't be able to supply that for you. So you're like, I'm going to make my own fanfare because that's how I have to be in this world. So
I'm so sorry because I should have listened to every episode of this podcast before coming on. But
no, you shouldn't. All 90 some odd episodes? No.
Does anyone not get it?
Not yet.
Wait, so everybody always gets it?
Well, so far,
hey,
yeah. We reserve the right to say no.
That would be so mean if someone comes in here and talks about it. No,
that's how we feel too.
Well, but no, it cheapens it. It's like I don't really feel like I even won anything.
Well, hey, that's on you. This medal.
Right.
This medal. Our money's as green as anyone else's. we haven't paid her anything yet. Just someday. We're gonna monetize one of these days. Don't worry about it. Hey,
no one's come. I feel like, well, maybe there was one that came a little close to maybe not getting it, but
and that's part of this journey.
Well, Julianne, anything you want to tell our listeners about? Anything you want to plug?
Hey, if you're in the Los Angeles area and you're looking for a show to see on the second Wednesday of every month, come see UCB Mod Team Lasers, 8:30 p.m. I think it's the second Wednesday. Yeah, the second Wednesday of every
We'll link it. Yeah.
Yeah. Check it out. And
His characters?
It's sketch comedy.
Sketch, cool.
And hey, give me a follow on Instagram, Julie Can. There might be underscores in there. I don't know.
We'll find it.
We'll link to it.
Find them. Yeah. If there's an underscore, we'll find it.
Yeah.
No stone unturned.
And I think that's all I have to plug.
Cool.
All right.
UCB's great, people. UCB, I've so enjoyed my time going to UCB and living in Los Angeles. So even if you're just visiting town, go see a show at UCB. You're not going to see something bad. Guaranteed. Yeah. It's cool.
Good,
and all the rest of you out there, you can give us a follow on social media if you aren't already. We sure appreciate it. It matters. to some degree, you know, and figuring that out. Social media is a weird place where I feel compelled to have a presence for us as a creative endeavor. But boy, do I wrestle with the ethics of it every single day of my life. So give us a follow on there and for more existential dread. And we appreciate you tuning in and listening to our podcast because it's really fun to make together. I love you, Michael.
I love you, Tyler. And if you have not listened to the Chicks Wide Open Spaces, you should listen to the whole thing because we've only given you those little snippets. So you got to listen to the whole thing. It is Julianne Lang approved, and you don't get a better sticker to put on it than that, as far as I'm concerned.
That's a good one. That's a good one right there.
Thanks for joining us, Julianne.
Thanks for having me. This was a blast.
We'll see y'all later.
Bye.